Hey, welcome to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. Check out our playlist for more amazing novels. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new audiobook. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 11, Horned Pomfret. Beneath the water, it was silent. Sunlight filtered down in tight beams, illuminating the depths. A fat catfish lay still in the silt, its blue-brown skin almost blending entirely with its surroundings. If not for Liang Qu's ability to sense it, it would be nearly impossible to notice this fierce predator lying in wait. Noticing Liang Qu's arrival, the catfish flicked its tail, stirring up a small cloud of dust, then released a bubble from its mouth. Following its direction, Liang Qu looked ahead. Beneath a rock covered in seaweed, two pomfret fish nestled together, one larger, one smaller. Strangely, each fish had a pair of small horns on its head. Treasure fish. There was no doubt about it. Shaped like pomfret but with horns, anyone could tell at a glance that these fish were extraordinary. As a low-ranking fisherman, Liang Qu had often heard of others catching treasure fish, though he had rarely seen one himself. This was the case for most of the fishermen in Yixing City. But fishermen had a unique way of identifying treasure fish. Treasure fish always displayed some kind of distinctive feature. Like the 72 black moles on Emperor Gaozu's thigh or the dual pupils of Shang Yu, the striped tiger fish at the pier nearby also had mystical markings resembling tiger stripes. When it was caught, the fishermen were sure it was a treasure fish, and they were right. Looking at the two fish, Liang Qu was visibly excited. He had been searching for treasure fish for days, and today, he stumbled upon two at once. Ah Fei, you're truly a lucky charm. The horned pomfrets, unaware they were being watched, continued to play beneath the rock. Hiding nearby, Liang Qu and the two creatures waited in silence, making no sudden moves. Observing the two fish for a while, Liang Qu noticed a hole under the rock where they played. It could be their nest. To prevent the possibility of an escape route in the nest, he had to wait until they swam out to make a move. He instructed the fat catfish to circle around an ambush from the other side, while he tied one end of his fishing net to the pig-woman dragon's tail. Working together, he and the creature slowly spread the net open. Fishing nets were a precious resource. He didn't own one himself, this one had been borrowed from Li Libo over a meal. Now, it was just a matter of waiting. If he struggled to hold his breath, Liang Qu would use a pig bladder filled with air, pressing it to his mouth to breathe. The gas inside had a rancid smell, but for the treasure fish, it was worth it. After waiting almost half an hour, the pig bladder nearly deflated when the horned pomfrets finally stirred. The two fish moved away from the nest, seemingly heading out to feed. Once they were a few meters away from the nest entrance, Liang Qu sensed the opportunity and quickly signaled the fat catfish to strike. At his command, the fat catfish burst from the silt, coiling its body into an arc before springing out. The resulting cloud of mud created a spectacular commotion. The six-whiskered catfish, nearly 2 meters long, surged forward with such intensity that it startled the horned pomfrets. Too far from the nest to retreat, the two fish had no choice but to flee in the opposite direction, right into Liang Qu's trap. Now was the moment. Liang Qu sprang into action as the pig-woman dragon swung its tail, raising the net upward. Together, they hauled the net into the current, enveloping the fleeing horned pomfrets. A powerful tug pulled at the rope holding the net. DMN, that's strong. They say a fish pulls 10 times its weight, this one felt like 3 times that. Liang Qu immediately activated his water control abilities to restrain the fish's struggles. With its horns, the fish could easily tear through the coarse fiber net, which wasn't as strong as modern nylon. If the net ripped, losing money would be the least of his worries, the fish escaping was the real problem. Steadying the horned pomfret's attempts to break free, Liang Qu swiftly maneuvered to secure the net, moving in circles with his companions, tightening the net around the treasure fish. Once they were thoroughly wrapped, he hauled the net up and climbed onto his boat, pulling the two horned pomfrets into the fish basket. Even in the basket, the horned pomfrets, feisty as they were, thrashed about, nearly toppling it over. Liang Qu held it steady with both hands, looking down at the horned fish with excitement. Ah Fei, you really did well. Now, his plans could be fast-tracked by at least half. But just how much could these treasure fish be worth? Should be worth a few taels of silver, at least. Maybe not enough for martial arts training, but enough to cover the autumn tax. They do look delicious, though. In the water, he hadn't thought much of it, but now that they were in the basket, the two fishes' allure was undeniable, like a hungry man smelling freshly cooked rice. He wasn't particularly hungry, yet the desire was overwhelming, a clear sign these were indeed treasure fish. Maybe he could try eating one. The temptation of treasure fish was powerful, and a bold idea took root in Liang Qu's mind. After consulting with Can't Move and Ah Fei, he found that the fish didn't seem to draw much interest from them. Likely, if it attracted other water beasts, it wouldn't have survived in the wild. His mind drifted to the cauldron of the waters. Could the fish have water essence? With that thought growing stronger, Liang Qu couldn't resist. After some deliberation, he decided to try the smaller horned pomfret. Carefully, he took the smaller fish out. Its head alone was as big as a human face, and it weighed about a jin, while the larger one was at least 3 jin. The horns were as hard as steel and quite sharp. He was lucky to have netted them quickly, or they'd have torn right through. Without a knife, Liang Qu used a sharp rock to gut the fish, releasing a burst of aroma that immediately caught the attention of his two beast companions, who perked up eagerly. Since both Can't Move and Ah Fei had helped catch the treasure fish, Liang Qu tossed the innards and scraps their way. They eagerly gobbled it up, showing no signs of disdain. After building a fire on board, Liang Qu placed a clay pot over it and, when the water boiled, added the fish slices. Though worried that cooking might weaken its effects, he only lightly poached the fish to check for parasites and then took a bite. The flavor was incredible. The sweetness of the fish burst in his mouth, firm, tender, and without any fishy smell. It was unlike any river fish he'd ever tasted, and entirely boneless. The taste was so amazing that he ate it all, even grinding down the skull until only the spine remained. He sucked the marrow dry before tossing it to Can't Move and Ah Fei. All that remained of the fish were its two small, finger-length horns. Essence of the waters plus 1.8. In his mind, the cauldron of the waters glowed in a bluish-green radiance. Seeing the message, Liang Qu was almost tempted to eat the larger fish, too. 1.8 units of water essence. That's the same as 18 pieces of essence lotus root. If the small fish had 1.8, then the big one could be 3 times that, perhaps even 5.4 units. With his fusion level at 6.5, eating both fish could bring it to 10 instantly. But Liang Qu held back. Knowing the fish could increase water essence was enough for now. The real priority was still his path of martial arts and the opportunity at the Zhao household. Being a martial artist would bring big money, grand homes, and beautiful servants. He focused on his goal, channeling the water essence from the treasure fish into the Z-Spirit's fusion. As the fish digested, its effects began to spread. A warmth spread from his stomach, filling his entire body. Lying beside the boat, Liang Qu felt his complexion visibly brighten as his body radiated heat. His blood pulsed through his veins like icy rivers, and every cell seemed to hum with life, greedily absorbing every ounce of vitality. Chapter 12. Unexpected fortune. His skin became smoother, and his body sturdier. After about an hour, as the warmth in his stomach dissipated, and most of the meal digested, Liang Qu compared his reflection in the water, realizing he'd gotten more handsome. Still dark-skinned, yes, but his previously rough skin had become much smoother, giving him a vigorous look. He clenched his fists, feeling an obvious surge in strength. When he swung his arms, there was a powerful rush. If, before, Liang Qu was like a kid who grew up on scraps and leftovers, now, after eating the treasure fish, he seemed like one raised on meat, eggs, and milk. Both ways led to healthy development, but the quality was on a whole different level, and his spirit was much brighter. The feeling of being full of strength was simply fantastic. He could jump higher, run faster, breathe more steadily. It was as if his whole body felt light. No wonder martial artists are so keen on getting their hands on treasure fish. It's truly a mystical food that nourishes the body and strengthens the spirit. If I had 100 of these, I wouldn't even need to join any martial arts school. I'd reach those 4 milestones of skin, flesh, bones, and blood on my own. Liang Qu stood up, dressed, and after making sure the excess redness from nourishment had faded from his face, he easily rowed his boat back to the pier, eager to sell the treasure fish in exchange for the opportunity to advance. But just as he was about to reach the shore and pay the docking fee, he noticed a large crowd gathered by the waterfront, buzzing with excitement. What's going on? Didn't we already have the Moon Festival last month? What's this about now? Putting down the oars, Liang Qu picked up his pole and moved closer to the pier. Someone came over to collect the docking fee. Taking out 2 copper coins from his pocket, he paid and, holding his fish basket, scanned the crowd, quickly spotting the tall figure of Li Libo. Sure enough, wherever there was excitement, Li Libo would be there. He was a born people watcher. Pulling him out of the crowd, Liang Qu asked, "What's going on here?" "Huh, who is it?" Li Libo, annoyed at being dragged away from the action, tried to free himself. But feeling the strength of the grip on his wrist, he turned around and saw it was Liang Qu. "Oh, it's you. What have you been taking? Your grip's strong as hell." Liang Qu ignored his complaint. "You still haven't told me what's going on. Why's there such a crowd?" "Hey, you're just in time. Somebody at our pier caught a treasure fish. It looks like a blackfish, but it's reddish all over, weighing in at 2 jin, 3 liang, and 6 qian. Someone caught one before. They call it the red perch. A single jin is worth 1 tael of silver." Li Libo spoke with excitement, as if he'd caught the treasure fish himself, totally missing the change in Liang Qu's expression. Treasure fish were rare, but not unheard of. About once a month, someone lucky would pull one in. But Liang Qu hadn't expected it to be today, just when he was about to sell his own. Fortunately, it didn't really matter. Treasure fish were always in demand. This just meant that if the martial artist bought 2 at once, he might pay extra out of excitement. Noticing the crowd around him, Liang Qu cleared his throat and called out, "It seems the river god favors Shengrao Pier. 2 treasure fish in 1 day." Li Libo, standing closest to him, cringed at the volume. "What are you babbling about? Chen Jichang only caught 1 treasure fish." Just then, the crowd's eyes turned towards him. Liang Qu held up his fish basket, gripping the gills of a horned pomfret and lifting it high. "I'm talking about the second one, this one's mine." "Wow," the crowd gasped, and what was once a single tight circle quickly split into 2. "That's just a pomfret, isn't it? Look closer, it's not a regular pomfret, look at the horns on its head." "Oh, wow, it really does have horns. It is a treasure fish." With the surrounding crowd's confirmation, the pier, already lively, erupted into an even louder commotion. More and more people gathered to catch a glimpse of the prized treasure fish. Usually, treasure fish had unique color patterns, but today, they were seeing one with horns on its head. "Who caught it?" "It's Huai, old Liang's son. He's a fantastic fisherman, he catches over 30 fish a day." "Old Liang, the one who passed away last month. He was lucky after all, huh? Man, he's got it made now. That treasure fish is worth several months' worth of rice. If I caught one, I could die happy. If you caught one, the only one profiting would be the brothel owner, haha." The crowd's energy was infectious. After all, having 2 treasure fish caught at the same pier on the same day was unheard of, and everyone wanted to share in the luck. Looking around, Liang Qu noticed the envy and open desire in everyone's eyes. He never thought he'd see the scenes described in novels actually come to life. "Ah Shui, I have an unmarried daughter, how about we make it official?" "Uncle Chen, your daughter is only 9, isn't she?" Liang Qu was stunned to recognize the man as Uncle Chen, someone he'd only met once before. "That won't work. She's not a match for this fine young man. Come to my house, and you can meet my daughter." "Oh, stop it, second she. Your girl's already 18. Don't you know the saying, an older woman is a gold treasure?" With Chen Qingzhong being wealthy enough to support his whole family, and Liang Qu's good looks and impressive fishing skills, he was now the most sought-after bachelor. Anyone with a daughter wanted a piece of the action. Liang Qu recalled the carriage that had avoided him when he first arrived here. It hadn't even been a month, and he now understood the saying, fortunes change. But Liang Qu harbored no resentment. As a poor man, he'd learned that solitude and resilience were all he could rely on. In the middle of the crowd, the two groups merged again. Liang Qu soon found himself face to face with Chen Jicheng, the other fisherman who'd caught a treasure fish. Around 20, Chen was tall and dark. Like most fishermen, nobody who worked the pier was pale. Known as one of the best fishermen at Shengrao Pier, he even outdid Uncle Chen, bringing in over 100 copper coins a day. Seeing Liang Qu, Chen Jicheng wasn't too thrilled that his spotlight was now shared, though he kept up a friendly front. That's the charm of country life. If I'm doing better than you, I'm happy; if not, I'm bitter. Back in school, Liang Qu had an uncle who'd finished high school. But when Liang Qu got into a prestigious college, his uncle always seemed sour about it. Whenever they met, he'd say that experience mattered more than degrees, and later that connections were what counted. The two men glanced at each other's treasure fish. Chen's fish looked much like a blackfish, but its whole body was blood red, as if dipped in fresh blood, a striking color. The martial artist is here. The martial artist's here. Make way, make way. The martial artists come to see the treasure fish. The crowd parted, and Liang Qu and Chen Jicheng looked up to see three men approaching. All three were clearly larger and more robust than the townsfolk, standing tall and straight-backed. Are these martial artists? Or just fighters? Only those who'd crossed the 4 milestones were truly considered martial artists. Without doing so, they were merely fighters. Pingyang town didn't have many actual martial artists, but the townsfolk, not knowing better, often mixed up the terms. One of the three introduced himself as Hu, saying he was from Pingyang town, passing through Yixing city on business. Hearing of the treasure fish at the pier, he'd come to see if it was true and was willing to buy them. Chen Jicheng eagerly stepped forward. Martial artist, please take a look at mine. Hu glanced at the fish. Red perch. How much does it weigh? 2 jin, 7 liang, and 6 qian. 3 taels of silver, will you sell? Absolutely. Chen Jicheng beamed with joy. 3 taels of silver was enough for more than a year's worth of rice. Just last month, a 3 jin, 6 liang spotted tiger fish sold for 3 taels and 5 qian. So, his red perch was even more valuable. Without even weighing it, Hu handed over the money, clearly confident that no one would dare deceive him. He then turned to Liang Qu and, seeing the horns on the pomfret's head, raised an eyebrow. Horned pomfret. That's rare. How much does it weigh? Watching Hu's expression, Liang Qu lowered his head slightly and replied, 3 jin, 2 liang, and 1 qian. During the crowd's earlier excitement, he'd had it weighed precisely, so there was no mistake. 6 taels and 5 qian, will you sell? 6 taels. Chen Jicheng froze, while the other fishermen around them fell silent. Chapter 13, Angry at the Progress Bar. The silence lingered for a while, punctuated by hushed murmurs. 6 taels and 5 qian. Really, 6 taels and 5 qian. Strange, isn't it? That's a fortune. It's all treasure fish. How come all shuis are so expensive, so special? Everyone was clearly shocked by the price martial artist who had offered. Nearby, Li Libo did some quick math on his fingers and was taken aback. Chen Jicheng's red perch weighed 2 jin and 7 liang and 6 qian, yet it only brought in 3 taels of silver, which amounts to a bit more than 1 tael and 1 qian per jin. But Liang Qu's horned pomfret, weighing 3 jin, 2 liang, and 1 qian, was worth 6 taels and 5 qian. That's nearly double the value of the red perch. Wait, why am I even saying the red perch, only, brought in 3 taels? Li Libo found himself at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Liang Qu himself was equally overwhelmed with joy. He had thought that catching one treasure fish would simply help him reach his goal of joining a martial arts school a bit faster, but he hadn't expected it to max out his progress bar completely. Counting the 2 taels and 8 qian he'd saved up recently, Liang Qu's total wealth had now surpassed 9 taels and 3 qian. Not only had he met the minimum requirement of 7 taels to join the martial arts school, but he also had enough to cover the autumn tax. As for the idea of not selling, that was entirely out of his mind. The martial artist's distinct pricing showed he wasn't taking advantage of the fisherman's lack of knowledge about the horned pomfret to lowball him, otherwise, he could have simply offered a price similar to that of the red perch. Moreover, a few taels of silver meant little to a martial artist. Chen Jicheng earned about 100 yuan a day, 3 taels a month, but his high living expenses kept him from amassing much. And if he were to try bargaining in Pingyang town, he'd likely face the same price squeeze. The fishermen weren't fools, nor were the martial artists. Selling it here saved him a trip of over 10 li. Sell it, of course I'll sell it. I just have one question for Master Hu. Liang Qu calmed himself and made a small request. Martial artist who kept it brief, asked. Subscribe to Chinese novel audio wave. Why is the horned pomfret worth double the price of a red perch, even though they're both treasure fish? The nearby fishermen perked up, their curiosity piqued. The world of martial artists was always shrouded in mystery and allure, and gaining some insider knowledge was definitely something to savor. Hearing Liang Qu's question, martial artist who didn't seem annoyed. He explained, the horns on the horned pomfret can be used in medicine, made into concentrated pills that help refine energy and break through the blood barrier. I'm currently at that stage, so it's very useful to me. So that's how it is. Liang Qu was glad he hadn't discarded the small pair of horns he'd kept earlier. Martial artist who seemed quite genuine. After that, everything went smoothly. Liang Qu handed over the fresh horned pomfret, and martial artist who tossed him a bag of silver without even asking for the cloth bag back. Before leaving, he called out, if any of you manage to catch another unusual treasure fish, come find me. I'll make sure you're well compensated. The fishermen at the pier cheered in unison. Body, flesh, bones, and blood, the 4 barriers. Based on what he'd revealed, martial artist who was already at the 4th stage. If he could break through, he'd no longer be addressed as a mere martial artist out of courtesy but rather as someone with solid skills. A few treasure fish were indeed critical. Liang Qu mused to himself. Once martial artist who left, the fishermen no longer held back, all loudly congratulating Liang Qu on his good fortune. Some even wanted to touch him, hoping to absorb some of that mysterious luck. In the past month and a half, Liang Qu had caught a yellowfish, a striped fish, and now even a treasure fish. He was like a walking good luck charm. Amid the crowd's excitement, Liang Qu held his money pouch tightly but didn't push anyone away. Fishing was far more unpredictable than farming, so fishermen often believed in the existence of mystical powers more than farmers did. Yixing City held many small and large ceremonies, but these were mostly sponsored by wealthy families using livestock. Of course, with the existence of true martial artists in this world, Liang Qu couldn't be certain there weren't even stranger forces out there. For a while, the spotlight at Shengrao Pier was entirely on Liang Qu, overshadowing everyone else who'd caught a treasure fish. Chen Jicheng stood on the edge of the crowd, clutching his heavy money pouch with a sense of frustration but ultimately left alone. Once the excitement died down and some fishermen dispersed, Li Libo called out, "My goodness, 6 taels. My family hasn't saved that much in generations. Enough talk. Who's the one about to join a martial arts school now?" Liang Qu tucked away his pouch, got back on his boat, and secretly stashed away the 2 thumb-sized fish horns he'd kept before handing Li Libo back his fishing net. "Your net really helped me out. Hey, then you owe me a meal, don't you? I was planning on it." Having struck it rich and about to join a martial arts school, Liang Qu was in high spirits and naturally wanted to celebrate. The two went to a small eatery and ordered a chicken, a plate of lamb, a dish of pork, and a pot of hot wine, spending over 100 yuan as they enjoyed a hearty meal. Liang Qu wasn't much of a drinker and wasn't used to alcohol, but Li Libo was. Fishermen often drank to warm themselves, so Liang Qu bought him a pot to thank him for lending the net. Once they'd eaten their fill, Li Libo, his face flushed from the drink, glanced around and whispered, "When are you planning to go to the martial arts school?" Liang Qu raised an eyebrow. "How did you know I was planning on that?" In his previous life, Liang Qu had been reclusive and had no close relationships at the pier, but in this life, he was more open. Having treated Li Libo to a few meals, the two had grown closer. Please, with all the questions you've asked me, even a fool could see your intentions. But it's normal, who hasn't thought about becoming a martial artist? That's a step above the rest of us, who reek of fish. Li Libo's tone held a touch of envy. Becoming a martial artist came with a registry and government stipends, elevating one's status above that of a commoner. There'd be no more fishing trips or the unavoidable fishy smell that soapwort couldn't wash away. Dishan's founding was only 60 years ago, and with recent years being peaceful, few went hungry, but people still struggled to put food on the table, living a difficult life. Every young man under 20 in Yixing City had dreamed of being discovered by a master, unlocking their hidden potential, and becoming a renowned martial artist. But most couldn't get past the high threshold of 7 taels, and even those who could afford it still faced a daunting path, as the saying goes, poor scholars, wealthy fighters. Li Libo had initially thought Liang Qu was just another dreamer, but today's treasure fish had made him see Liang Qu in a new light. 6 taels and 5 qian, almost enough for the entry fee. This kid might be joining the martial arts school along with me after all. It seemed almost too convenient. Just after asking him about it, Liang Qu landed a fortune big enough for the martial arts school. And then there was the fight with Bald Zhang. Now that he thought of it, Bald Zhang hadn't been seen in over half a month, rather odd. Li Libo sensed something was amiss but couldn't quite put his finger on it. There was simply no one else in Yixing City quite like Liang Qu. That's right. My father left some savings, and it's enough now, Liang Qu replied, deciding not to hide it. Li Libo, satisfied, threw his arm around Liang Qu's shoulders and laughed, perfect. I was worried I'd get bullied at the school. Now we can be martial brothers. Chapter 14, Joining the Martial Arts School. Back at home, Liang Qu poured out the entirety of his savings, 9 taels and 3 qian of silver, plus 127 copper coins. This was everything he owned right now. The small pieces of silver clinked against the hard bed, rolling around with a satisfying sound. The more he listened, the more excited he became. It had been 26 days since he arrived in this world, nearly a month, and he finally saved up enough money to study martial arts, to witness one of the world's profound wonders. It hadn't been easy. Not at all. Liang Qu continued fiddling with the silver pieces, entranced by their enticing white shimmer. For a brief moment, he felt an odd resonance, like that of Grandit from Eugenie Grandit. But spending this money now was a step towards making more in the future and living a better life. Taking a deep breath, he set aside 7 taels, placing them carefully into the small coin pouch that martial artist who had given him. He tucked it safely into his pocket. Yixing City was big, and Bald Zhang wasn't the only thug in town. With thousands of people, there were bound to be a few rotten characters. But he wasn't the same orphan struggling to survive anymore. People would have to think twice before messing with him now. The remaining 2 taels, 3 qian, and the copper coins were buried in the dirt under his rice bin, ready to cover the autumn tax. The Dishan dynasty had implemented a unified tax policy, where all taxes were combined into one. It seemed simple on the surface, but the total amount hadn't decreased at all. Money had to be prepared, failing to pay would result in forced labor, a costly mistake. Once the taxes were paid, and he was enrolled in the martial arts school, he'd have a little more financial leeway. First on the list was to buy a mattress. The hard bed he currently had was unbelievably uncomfortable. He'd save a few more taels to repay Uncle Chen. Life would be much better then. With a sense of excitement, Liang Qu finally drifted off in the early morning. The next day, with faint dark circles under his eyes, Liang Qu saw Li Libo, who also had similar dark circles. The two shared a glance and burst into laughter. What time did you go to bed last night? Around midnight. And you? Second watch. Liang Qu chuckled. No wonder your circles are darker than mine. Li Libo snorted, looking around, then whispered, Did you bring the money? Yeah. Liang Qu nodded. He'd set out early, eager to pay the martial arts school fee as soon as possible to avoid any last-minute trouble that might stir up unwanted attention. Once the fee was paid, no hooligan would dare bother the martial artists. As for Li Libo, today wasn't his originally planned day for apprenticeship. But seeing Liang Qu's eagerness, he decided to join him, with his father's approval. Following the road, the two arrived at the entrance of Yixing City, spending 10 yuan on a cart ride to nearby Pingyang town. The bumpy road was lined with trees, dense and towering. On sunny days, the path was picturesque, but Liang Qu imagined that few would dare take this road at night, especially under gloomy skies. With that thought, he grew even more eager to reach Pingyang town. He remembered that, like Chen Qingzhong, he used to accompany his father carrying baskets of fish to Pingyang town to fetch a good price. The scene was worlds apart from that of Yixing City. Fresh roasted chestnuts, just out of the oven. Warm and fragrant. Fresh blood soup, hot blood soup. Osmanthus buns, freshly steamed. The street bustled with hawkers' cries. The main street was paved with wide flagstones, unlike the narrower, mud-covered streets back in Yixing. Even the side paths here were paved with stone. Shops lined both sides of the street, their eaves forming an unbroken line. Each store tried to outshine the next, setting up vibrant awnings outside. "Hey there, want to try too? They're delicious. I'll take 2. Liang Qu tossed over a few coins, taking 2 osmanthus buns and handing one to Li Libo. Hiss, hot, hot, hot. Li Libo juggled it between his hands, letting it cool down before taking a bite, savoring the fragrant sweetness. Liang Qu had tried osmanthus cake before, but this was his first osmanthus bun. It wasn't quite as tasty as he'd imagined, lacking the modern texture he was used to. Pingyang town's prosperity exceeded his expectations. The bustling crowd reminded him of the grandeur of Bianjingyan along the river during the Qingming festival. It seemed that productivity here was more advanced than he'd imagined. He wondered what Dishan's capital would look like. As he mused, he followed Li Libo's lead, arriving at the young martial arts school he had longed to see. The school wasn't lavish, but it was sizable, positioned at the edge of Pingyang town, backed by a cedar forest. A stone wall enclosed the backyard, and people could often be seen coming and going, likely those staying at the 10-tail accommodations. At the entrance stood a long table with a young man sitting behind it. As they approached, he stood up, clasping his hands in "Greetings, I am Shang Chengsong. You two look unfamiliar. Are you here to study or visiting a friend?" Li Libo, being the older, returned the greeting respectfully. "Hello, we're here to study." "Are you aware of the tuition?" "Yes, 7 taels, correct." "That's right. 7 taels doesn't include board, 10 taels covers lodging, and 20 includes herbal baths, while food is extra. For 50 taels, you get full board and herbal baths. The term is 3 months, with the same instruction provided for all. How much you learn is up to you. After 3 months, if you haven't passed the skin barrier, one of the 4 barriers of body, flesh, bones, and blood, you'll need to pay again to stay on." Liang Qu was astounded. 50 taels just for the premium herbal bath. He'd have to catch 10 horned pomfrets to afford that. Most ordinary folks wouldn't earn that much in a lifetime. As for the term length, that made sense. Talentless students couldn't just linger forever. The young martial arts school seemed well organized. Even the staff at the door were polite, showing no disdain for their fishy smell. It was different from the martial arts clichés in novels. Where was the arrogant gatekeeper? Li Libo nodded repeatedly. Got it, got it. We're just going for the 7-tael package." Shang Chengsong's expression remained neutral. He gestured to the table. "In that case, please come over to register. I'll need your names, ages, and birthplaces, along with the fee." The two stepped up, providing their information, which Shang Chengsong read back for confirmation. The characters in this world were pictographic, oddly resembling the ones from Liang Qu's previous life. He'd been surprised at first but got used to it over time, never exposing his literacy skills. He just nodded along like Li Libo, pretending to confirm. Once everything was confirmed, Shang Chengsong led them into the school, down a corridor to the payment office, handing over the paper with their information. After weighing their silver, he received 2 wooden plaques, one for each of them. The whole process was smooth, suggesting the school had enrolled quite a few students before. Liang Qu examined his wooden plaque, noting that it bore only his name and registration date. After 3 months, it would be void. The Yang Martial Arts School wasn't heavily populated, so students were mostly remembered by face, with no real need for extra security measures. Congratulations, both of you. From today onward, you're disciples of the Yang Martial Arts School. You may call me Senior Brother Shang. Senior Brother Shang. They chimed together. Shang Chengsong smiled. I'll give you a brief tour and explain some basics about martial arts, so you'll have a better understanding of this path. Thank you, Senior Brother Shang. Liang Qu's spirits lifted. This was the part he had been eagerly awaiting. After a month in this world, he was finally getting a taste of the real stuff. Chapter 15. Skin, Flesh, Bone, Blood. The foundation of martial arts is divided into 4 stages: skin, flesh, bone, and blood. You've probably all heard of them, but honestly, it's not that complicated. It's all about training. Training. Exactly, training, relentless training. Build up your strength until it's boundless. When a regular person could be injured just by brushing against you, or killed from a simple touch, that's when you can be called a true master. Following behind Shang Chengsong, Liang Qu couldn't help but grimace at these words. Attaining a body as tough as iron. Sure, but how does one even begin such training? Back in his previous life, Liang Qu had learned from Olympic-level athletes that the human body has limits. Without special methods, no amount of training could allow mere flesh to break stone. Shang Chengsong's next words confirmed this reality. Of course, no matter how hard an average person trains, there's a limit. They'd be lucky to hold their own against 10 people. To break past this limit, you need 2 things: methods and medicine. Methods and medicine. Exactly. Methods, like the ones our Yang Martial Arts School provides, such as our 3-fist technique, give you a foundation to work on, a ladder to climb. Liang Qu asked, and medicine? Shang Chengsong replied, the methods may create the ladder, but it's steep and treacherous. Without some support, you might fall and break every bone. That's where medicine comes in. Since you both came from Yixing City, you must have heard about the 2 treasure fish that were caught at the pier yesterday, right? Liang Qu clasped his hands respectfully. Senior Shang, to be honest, one of those treasure fish, the horned pomfret weighing over 3 jin, was my catch. I sold it for 6 taels and 5 jian and used my savings to finally afford the martial arts tuition. Shang Chengsong paused, realizing the 7 taels Liang Qu had just paid likely came from that fish sale, and chuckled. It seems Brother Liang has some good fortune. The treasure fish are exactly the kind of medicine we need. A single treasure fish can be worth a month's progress in training. There's also treasure meat and treasure plants. As long as something boosts our stamina and power, it qualifies as medicine. To enhance the effects, many methods have specific medicinal recipes that complement them, creating a synergy. For example, the 3-fist technique has its own recipe. Others can benefit from it too, but it works best with our method. In a pinch, just eating more meat helps a bit, too. Liang Qu's mind started racing. He didn't have access to treasure meat, but he knew his way around treasure fish and treasure plants. The Zhonghuai wetlands held plenty of treasure fish, and he could find at least 2 fat catfish every few days. Over time, couldn't he soar to new heights? Meanwhile, Li Libo appeared downcast. Shang Chengsong noticed but wasn't surprised. Many assume that just joining a martial arts school will guarantee results, which is far from true. Martial arts require wealth. Kids raised on meat will always grow up stronger than those surviving on scraps. Seeing his 2 juniors were likely from humble families, Shang Chengsong didn't belabor the point but instead encouraged them. Don't lose heart, Brother Li. Not having medicine doesn't make the path to martial mastery impossible. Some are born with natural talent and can progress quickly even without medicine. Thank you, Senior Shang, I'll remember that. Shang Chengsong nodded and led them further inside. These 4 stages, skin, flesh, bone, and blood, are checkpoints in the early stages of martial arts. Each breakthrough brings new benefits and raises us to the next level. Under his explanation, Liang Qu gained a clearer understanding of these stages. To put it simply, unlocking the skin stage makes one's skin as tough as cowhide, adding significant defense. Unlocking the flesh stage boosts one's strength tremendously. Lifting a person with one hand becomes a simple feat. Unlocking the bone stage allows one to unleash strength freely, truly achieving the power to break stones with bare hands. Unlocking the blood stage brings an explosive increase in vitality, enhancing all aspects of strength and endurance. If you can unlock the skin stage within 3 months, you can stay in the school for an extra 2 months. If you manage it in 70 days, you might even catch Master Yang's eye and become a true disciple, learning more advanced techniques. These words fired up Li Libo's spirit, and even Liang Qu couldn't help but feel eager to start his training. At this moment, Shang Chengsong stopped. This is the training ground, our main gathering place. Around 30 people occupied the training ground. Some were doing stance training, some were lifting stones, and others were sparring. The youngest looked even younger than Liang Qu, while the oldest appeared over 30. Most were men, though there were a few women. The place looked like an oversized gym. Seeing the group of 30 made Liang Qu envious. Even if they were all paying the minimum 7-tael tuition, that amounted to over 200 taels. Every 3 months, that's more than enough to buy a large estate. And on the last 5 days of each month, Master Yang personally comes to teach. That's your chance to ask questions. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. We can only see Master Yang at the end of the month. Li Libo was stunned. He'd thought joining the school would mean receiving direct instruction from a martial artist, but that wasn't the case. What are we supposed to do in the meantime? Shang Chengsong didn't answer directly. Instead, he called over a sturdy man lifting a stone in the training ground. Senior brother Hu. Curious, Liang Qu looked over and was surprised to see it was the same martial artist who had bought his fish yesterday. What a small world. Then again, given the limited number of fighters in Pingyang town, it wasn't all that surprising to run into him. As Hu approached, Shang Chengsong explained, "Normally, you'll be taught by Senior Brother Hu, one of Master Yang's direct disciples. He's the instructor for the middle of the month. Senior Brother Hu is knowledgeable and skilled, and you'll be learning under him. Now that you're settled, I'll head back to the entrance to handle registration. Farewell, Senior Shang." As Senior Brother Hu reached them, he glanced at the name boards. "Brothers, I'm Hu Qi. From now on, it's you." Liang Qu cupped his hands respectfully. "It's good to see you again, Senior Brother Hu." Hu Qi thought for a moment, then laughed as he realized the connection. "Small world indeed. From now on, you'll both be under my instruction. But first, I'll need to check your bone structure." Bone structure. Li Libo's eyes lit up with excitement. Could he be a natural-born martial arts genius? Seeing Li Libo's eager expression, Hu Qi chuckled knowingly. It's not as mystical as it sounds. Good bone structure does help you train faster and hit harder, but it doesn't necessarily indicate talent. Besides, our 3-fist technique includes 3 styles: tiger, crane, and monkey fist, each suited to different bone structures. That's something other martial arts schools don't offer. With that, Hu Qi examined Li Libo's wrists, shoulders, and hips before saying, "Brace yourself." Hu Qi's fingers pressed into his spine. Hiss. Hearing Li Libo suck in a breath, Liang Qu winced sympathetically. He'd seen movies where assassins killed people with moves like this. Hu Qi withdrew his fingers. "Above average. I suggest focusing on the monkey fist." Li Libo looked somewhat disappointed. Then it was Liang Qu's turn. Hu Qi went through the same checks on his wrists, shoulders, hips, and finally his spine. When Hu Qi pressed his fingers in, Liang Qu felt half of his body go numb. But to his surprise, it was Hu Qi who reacted. Brother Liang, your bone structure is excellent." Chapter 16, Ape Arms, Wasp Waist, and Mantis Legs. Hu Qi finished examining Liang Qu's bones, clicking his tongue in amazement. "In all my years studying bone structure, this is the first time I've seen such a perfect wasp waist, ape arms, and mantis legs." "How old are you, Junior Brother Liang?" "Almost 16. Then you've still got room to grow, you'll be at least 60 shan feet tall by the time you're done." In Dishan measurements, 1 foot is a bit over 30 centimeters, so 6 feet is more than 1.8 meters. Upon hearing this, Liang Qu breathed a sigh of relief. His past life hadn't provided much nutrition, so his current height wasn't impressive. He'd been worried about not growing taller. Standing nearby, Li Libo made a face. DMN it, I'm grinding my teeth here. How come you get all the luck with good looks and strong bones? If you don't treat me to dinner tonight, we're not through. Liang Qu casually replied, next time, for sure. Hu Qi continued, you're particularly suited to focus on ape fist. You also have an excellent foundation for archery. If you have the chance in the future, junior brother Liang, give it a try. At this, both of them were caught off guard. Hold on, senior brother Hu, why is it that my, above average, foundation makes me suitable for ape fist, and his high quality foundation also leads to ape fist? Hu Qi explained, a strong foundation comes in many forms. It's not just the wasp waist, ape arms, and mantis legs combination. This type of physique is the most suited for ape fist, as it's perfect for building tension like drawing a bow and releasing force like shooting an arrow, quick, powerful, and explosive. Tiger form would also work well, but crane form wouldn't be as ideal. Li, in your case, your arm reach is long, but you don't have the power of the tiger form stance or the lightness of the crane form. So ape fist is still the best fit. Liang Qu suddenly understood. He was suited for ape fist because of his natural talent, while Li Libo was better suited because he didn't fit the other forms. Maybe his affinity for ape fist was connected to the water monkey Z spirit he had fused with. After merging with the water monkey's spirit, Liang Qu could feel changes in his body, perhaps it had altered his foundation. Seeing Li Libo's dejection, Hu Qi comforted him, no need to lose heart, junior brother Li. Having a weaker foundation doesn't mean it limits your future. There's no guarantee that someone with a weaker foundation will progress slower than someone with a stronger one. And junior brother Liang, just because you have a strong foundation, don't become overconfident. It doesn't determine your future either. Thank you, senior brother Hu, for your advice. Hu Qi nodded, pulling 2 books from his coat. These contain Master Yang's 3 fist techniques, ape, tiger, and crane. You can both learn them, but it's best to focus on what suits you best as I recommended. Do you know how to read? If not, it's fine, there are illustrations. Follow the steps, and I'll be here to guide you. Hu Qi was thorough and thoughtful. As Liang Qu flipped through the manual, he couldn't help but feel that the Young Martial Arts School was full of talented people with great advice. He really liked it here. The manual was divided into 6 sections covering the training and techniques for ape, tiger, and crane fist. Liang Qu focused on the training methods to build a solid foundation. The training primarily relied on stance work, with each style featuring 32 specific stances. Some were identical, some similar, and some were entirely unique. Learning 3 techniques for 7 taels of silver was a good deal. Liang Qu knew the saying, a well-fed man listens to advice. So he took Hu Qi's advice and focused on ape fist, practicing the stance techniques outlined in the book. He stood with his feet apart, chest slightly tucked, shoulders relaxed, elbows low, and abdomen firm, drawing in his waist and loosening his hips, controlling his breath as it settled in his dantian. Your feet aren't right, keep the soles slightly hollow. You're too stiff. That's it, perfect. Junior brother Li, relax, don't tense up. Your movements are too rigid. Top light, bottom solid. With both solid and void in balance, hold the stance as long as possible to let your body memorize it. Under Hu Qi's guidance, they moved from one correct stance to the next. By noon, Liang Qu had learned 3 stances, while Li Libo had only managed 2. At midday, they weren't provided food with their 7-tael tuition, so the 2 went out to find a quick meal at a nearby stall. When they returned, they saw someone bringing out a large wooden barrel from the backyard filled with steaming medicinal liquid. Some of the trainees approached the barrel, each grabbing a bowl to drink from it in one go. Li Libo stretched his neck to get a better look. Is that medicine? Weren't we told that each fist style comes with its own medicinal formula? How come I haven't seen any? Maybe the formula is more valuable. The school probably makes money off those recipes. Liang Qu guessed. Ah, you only realize how scarce money is when you need it. There's no helping it. We were born at the bottom. If we want to change, we have to rely on ourselves, so we'd better buckle down and learn a few more moves this afternoon. In the afternoon, Liang Qu learned 5 more stances and could perform them smoothly without guidance, while Li Libo only learned 3. By 6 o'clock, it was already dark when they left the martial arts school, so they opted to walk back to Yixing City instead of taking a cart. It was over 10 li, around 5 kilometers, taking nearly half an hour, and once they reached town, the two parted ways. Liang Qu found a simple stall to eat his dinner, no longer sticking to his usual options, but instead ordering 2 meat dishes, 1 vegetable, and a bowl of rice. Now that he was training, he needed extra nutrition. The days passed steadily. With the foundation in place, Liang Qu learned faster. He devoted himself entirely to his training, keeping his social life minimal. He only knew Hu Qi and Shang Chengsong at the martial arts school. Thanks to his hard work, it took him less than 4 days to complete all the stances for Ape Fist. In that same time, Li Libo had only reached the 20th stance. Hu Qi's assessment had been spot on. After Liang Qu completed the final stance, Hu Qi nodded. To master all the stances in under 4 days is the fastest I've ever seen. Now, perform them smoothly, from start to finish. Yes. Following Hu Qi's instruction, Liang Qu went through each stance from the first to the last, taking nearly half an hour. His movements were fluid and refined. Midway through, he felt a faint energy gathering within him, circulating with his movements, like soaking in a warm bath. Though drenched in sweat, he also felt invigorated. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced before. Previously, after completing his stances, he only felt tired and overheated. How does it feel? Do you sense any qi? Yes. To feel qi after a single session shows your vitality is strong, you have talent. When the qi becomes as thick as a finger and your vitality surges like a wave, it means you're ready to temper your skin. Once you break through the skin barrier, it's true transformation. Liang Qu immediately asked, how does one break through? Well, that involves medicine. When it's time to break through, I'll explain it in detail. Junior brother Liang, just focus on training diligently for now. Hu Qi smiled, leaving the rest unsaid. In truth, he didn't think these 2 juniors had much chance of breaking through. It wasn't that he looked down on them, but it was the reality. His own family in Pingyang town had spent generations slaughtering pigs to afford his training. For 2 fishermen with no backing and earnings lower than ordinary farmers, it was better not to pile on unrealistic expectations. Liang Qu wasn't one to press for details. Instead, he asked to learn the tiger fist stances. Although he'd focus on Ape Fist, he didn't see a reason not to broaden his horizons. The 3 fist styles shared some similarities, making it easier to learn additional techniques. Learning all the stances would also allow him to practice independently, saving the time he spent on traveling the 10 or more li to the school. 1 round trip was over an hour, which was enough time to practice 3 sets of stances. Hu Qi wasn't surprised, either. All right, I'll teach you the 24 unique stances of Tiger Fist. By 3 in the afternoon, Liang Qu had mastered 1 of the Tiger Fist stances, then requested a leave from Hu Qi. Under Li Libo's puzzled gaze, he hurriedly left the school. The fat catfish in his mental link had just informed him it had found another treasure fish. Chapter 17, Another Treasure Fish. Rapid Growth. Controlling the 6-whiskered catfish was truly worth it. Just 5 days after discovering the horned pomfret, another surprise appeared today. If I could catch a treasure fish every 5 days, no one in the Yang martial arts school would dare dream of such a luxury, right? With that thought, Liang Qu quickened his pace, reaching Yixing City in just half an hour. Although the area around Pingyang town is also part of the Huai wetlands and could be accessed by water, Liang Qu decided to head back to the dock to avoid drawing attention. Once there, he used his mental link to sense the direction, launched his boat, and paddled toward his target. The pig woman dragon, summoned by his call, emerged from the water to meet him. The Huai wetlands aren't as calm as they appear. Aside from the major demons in the depths, even the shallow areas have creatures like the pig woman dragon species, which can reach 4 or 5 meters in length and easily capsize small boats. With the "can't move" guardian, things are far safer. Liang Qu grabbed a net and dived in. Since eating the horned pomfret, he'd been busy selling fish and learning martial arts, never testing his water skills with his improved fusion level. Now, as he moved underwater, he felt incredibly at ease. Cauldron Master, Liang Qu. Refined Z Spirit. Water Monkey White Fusion Level, 8.3%. Essence of the Waters, none. Blessing of the Rivers, none. Commanded Water Beasts, Taihua Crocodile, 6-whiskered catfish. Evaluation. This water monkey Z spirit originates from the great Huai Whirlpool Lord. Although its abilities are limited, it's a promising start for someone insignificant. The fusion level had reached 8.3%, allowing Liang Qu to control 50 jin of water, with a slight boost in precision. His theory had proven right. As the Z-Spirit's fusion level increased, so did the water flow intensity and control, even enabling him to form water blades and potentially control blood flow in the future. Things were looking promising. The last line of the evaluation also gave him some pause. Since acquiring the Cauldron of the Waters, he often studied its patterns. He guessed that the so-called Huai Whirlpool Lord might actually be the legendary Wujiqi. Wujiqi, according to myth, was a massive ape with a blue body, white head, golden eyes, and snowy fangs, the exact likeness of the prominent markings on the cauldron. It was said that Yu the Great, with the aid of Yinglong, couldn't kill it and instead sealed it underwater. And who was Yinglong? The ancient mythological creator god, a true dragon and progenitor of Dragonkind. According to legend, fish and shrimp that took even a sip of Yinglong's urine could transform into dragons. Such a comparison speaks volumes. As for the other carvings, they seemed to represent other water deities, including a human-headed, serpent-bodied figure that might be Gonggong. There was also a mysterious black emperor. Liang Qu had a feeling he was powerful, especially since the spear held by this god looked remarkably like a trident, almost like Erlang Shen's. But is Erlang Shen a water god? This cauldron of the waters was definitely a divine artifact of great power. Rumors claim a flood dragon lies dormant in the depths of the Zhonghuai wetlands, stirring up storms whenever it awakens after 60 years of slumber. But before Wujiqi, it would be nothing more than a snack. Alas, I'm merely a water monkey, leagues away from the Huai Whirlpool Lord. The journey ahead is long and demands great effort. Under the pig-woman-dragon's guard, Liang Qu located the fat catfish, only to discover that this so-called treasure fish was an enormous fish with orange tiger-like stripes all over, a spotted tiger fish. It looked just like the one caught last month at the dock nearby, only this one was massive, nearly arm length, and around 6 to 7 jin. If sold, it could be worth more than the horned pomfret. Ah Fei, you're really my lucky star. Liang Qu happily patted the fat catfish on the head, directing both creatures to take positions, surrounding the target from 3 sides. Thanks to his water monkey abilities, fish rarely noticed him. He instructed the fat catfish and pig-woman dragon to launch the first assault. Frightened, the spotted tiger fish tried to escape, only to find Liang Qu already lying in wait. It was too late to flee, the momentum prevented it from turning. Dozens of jin of water pressed on the fish, trapping it in place. Liang Qu turned, swung his net like a golfer, and gracefully captured the spotted tiger fish. Nice. Quickly twisting the net handle, he wrapped the spotted tiger fish in it, hugged it tightly, and swam back to the surface, tossing it into the boat's hold. Climbing back aboard, Liang Qu took out a stone knife and deftly gutted the fish, discarding the innards, gills, and scraps for the 2 beasts to devour. The creatures opened their mouths, gobbling with excitement, their tails splashing foam across the water. Wait a minute, are you two getting bigger? As Liang Qu boiled water for fish slices, he noticed that both water beasts seemed to have grown. At first, he was too focused on catching the treasure fish to notice, but now he saw that, can't move, had surpassed its former 2-meter length. The fat catfish also looked nearly half a meter longer, almost reaching 2.3 or 2.4 meters. He'd only been controlling them for less than a month. This growth was definitely not normal. Then he recalled the Cauldron of the Waters' previous evolution prompt. Could it be that these two had absorbed the essence of the waters from the treasure fish scraps? He focused on the cauldron. 77.9 units of essence of the waters can evolve the Taihua crocodile into a Jiaomu crocodile. 77.8 units of essence of the waters can evolve the six-whiskered catfish into a tiger head catfish. So, it was true. Overjoyed, Liang Qu realized that feeding treasure fish scraps had turned out to be unexpectedly beneficial, a cost-free means of enhancement. All right, the bigger, the better. Size is power, and power is beauty. Here, have some more, the fish head's yours too. Liang Qu sucked the fish brain clean and tossed the head to the beasts. To any bystander, it might seem like he was being stingy by only feeding them scraps. But compared to before, when they were mindless, these beasts had gained intelligence under his command, allowing them to specifically seek out treasure fish. In the past, they would wander aimlessly, mistaking a treasure fish for a regular one. Only when hungry would they go after it, let alone actively catch it. Treasure fish were stronger, faster, and much harder to catch than ordinary ones. In short, they'd gotten the better end of the deal. The 7-jin spotted tiger fish, even after removing inedible parts, yielded over 4 jin of meat. Though the fish was incredibly tasty, Liang Qu eventually had to force the last bites down. Thankfully, the essence of the waters didn't disappoint. Essence of the waters plus 3.4. Sucking the marrow from the fish bones, Liang Qu tossed them to the two beasts. He felt hot and flushed, but he persevered, practicing his ape fist technique. Practicing right after eating a treasure fish yields the best results, no chance to waste such an opportunity. The spotted tiger fish wasn't as potent as the horned pomfret, but its sheer quantity made up for it, providing even more vitality. As Liang Qu practiced his fist technique, warmth surged through him, and a faint breath of qi gathered in his chest. Last time, this qi appeared halfway through his practice. This time, after just 3 stances, it was already there, proving the treasure fish's power. The qi rapidly strengthened as he moved, making him sweat profusely. By the end of his practice, his body was drenched. Drinking down the fish soup to replenish his fluids, he pushed through exhaustion and completed 3 rounds of practice. As night fell, the fish in his stomach was fully digested. By now, the qi in his chest had grown from a mere thread to the thickness of a hair, lingering for almost another half moment before it finally dissipated. Liang Qu collapsed onto the boat, completely drained, and fell into a deep sleep. The pig woman dragon and the 6-whiskered catfish circled the boat, quietly standing guard. The next morning, feeling sticky, Liang Qu jumped into the water for a good wash before returning to shore. His muscles were now noticeably defined, and he'd grown a bit taller, looking even more vigorous. According to Hu Qi, once the qi in his chest is as thick as a finger, he can start skin tempering to break through the skin barrier. At this rate, it won't take more than 3 months. Breaking through the skin barrier was in sight. Feeling elated, Liang Qu gazed at the rising sun, as if seeing a whole new chapter in his life unfold. Ah Fei, go catch some fish. Can't move, you stand guard over the lotus pond. Chapter 18, Beating a Dog While It's Down. The haul from this fishing trip was huge. Not only did he catch a treasure fish, but his Z-Spirit fusion rate also broke through to 11.7%. The Zhonghuai wetlands truly were a land of fortune and needed more exploration. He had only explored less than half of the waters near Shengrao Pier, and there was still much to uncover. Besides treasure fish, the treasure plants there were also excellent finds. Liang Qu also noticed that as he grew stronger, his mental clarity improved too. Perhaps soon, he would be able to command another aquatic beast. The weather was getting colder, and his can't-move technique was becoming less effective. He needed a new water beast for support to help him catch fish and explore the deeper waters. By noon, Ah Fei had caught about 30 fish, and Liang Qu rowed back to the pier, pretending he'd spent the night fishing. He sold the fish to the fishing gear rentals again, where he was met by Lin Songbao, the second son of the shop manager Lin Di. Lin Songbao helped move the fish and asked, "Ah Shui, you haven't been selling fish here the past few days. Went to town, did you? I'd say, with how skilled you are at fishing, what's the point in traveling over 10 miles? That many fish are heavy to carry." Liang Qu chuckled, "Yeah, I did go to town, but not to sell fish. I went to learn martial arts." Learn martial arts? Lin Songbao, who was weighing the fish, looked shocked and examined Liang Qu from head to toe. His tone was filled with regret. Did you blow all the money from the last treasure fish on martial arts? Yep, why, you're nuts. Lin Songbao looked at him with frustration. Ah Shui, you're still young, you have no idea how deep the waters run with martial arts. Sure, the entry fee might only be 6 or 7 taels, but without dozens more to buy medicinal herbs, you'll get nowhere. There are 3 martial arts schools in Pingyang town. Every year, countless farmers and fishermen save for over a decade to go, but what happens? After 3 months, they slink back and go back to farming or fishing for life. Some don't have the vitality for it and end up crippled or dead from training. If you saved that 7 taels and kept fishing, you could marry a decent girl. What a waste. It was clear that Lin Songbao felt it was a waste of money to spend it on martial arts training. Liang Qu just scratched his head and smiled without explaining further. After counting the copper coins from the sale, he headed home. For the next couple of days, he didn't plan on going back to the martial arts school. Eating that treasure fish had caused some noticeable changes in him, and he didn't want anyone seeing anything suspicious. He hadn't yet finished learning Tiger and Crane Fist, but he had completed Ape Fist, so he could train effectively at home. Where the hell is that kid? 3 young men loitered outside his house. One was chewing on a grass stem, another leaned against the wall, all of them looking annoyed. Should we go back in and check? I bet he stashed the money somewhere in there. Nobody would carry that much silver around. Didn't we already turn the place upside down? Nothing but a few pounds of rough rice, and even his bedding was ragged. After selling a treasure fish, how could he not spend any of that money? You think he took it all to pay for martial arts lessons? 6 taels or so would about cover it. Some dumb farmer actually thinking he can make it big through martial arts. Some people are just foolish, but hey, second brother, look over there. Isn't that him? The one called second brother squinted into the distance. The figure coming toward them looked vaguely familiar, though he seemed a bit different in bearing than before. Looks like him. Let's hide so we don't scare him off. From a distance, Liang Qu frowned. Ever since refining the Z-spirit, his senses had sharpened, and he'd spotted the 3 young men loitering outside his house right away. He could tell they were up to no good from the way they ducked out of sight as soon as they saw him. Liang Qu knew these 3 infamous brothers from the Wang family in Yixing City. They weren't fishermen but farmers with over 10 acres on the back hills, a lot like Bald Zhang, though not as ruthless. They often bullied others, always taking their place first by the river to water their crops. Anyone trying to cut in would get their head bashed in. Liang Qu didn't farm, but he'd heard the rumors. The Wang brothers were notorious, and it was clear why they were blocking his door now. They'd heard he'd recently sold a treasure fish and thought they could steal his silver. But Liang Qu wasn't worried. He was no longer the same person who once had to scheme cautiously to handle even Bald Zhang. With his water monkey fusion rate over 10, his strength had surged. Even on land, he was much stronger now, especially after the nourishment from the 2 treasure fish and treasure lotus. Although he hadn't yet learned the actual techniques in the 3-fist technique, he could defend himself well enough. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audio Wave. In the alley, the Wang brothers waited, growing impatient. What's taking him so long? That little brat hurt his leg or something. Walking that slow. No, it's just that I'm looking for a proper weapon. Who's there? The voice startled them, and when the eldest Wang brother looked up, he was met with a flying brick. Liang Qu leapt down from the rooftop, brick in hand, and smashed it into Wang eldest's face. Blood spurted from his nose, teeth shattered, and the brick split in 2 on impact. And you? Liang Qu went at Wang second with the other half of the brick, smashing it down on his forehead and splitting his scalp open. Wang third was dumbfounded, watching his 2 brothers collapse to the ground. Liang Qu, why are you attacking my brothers? You're the scum who deserves it. I'll beat you just because I feel like it. Liang Qu charged at Wang third, brandishing both halves of the broken brick. Fighting is all about momentum. Liang Qu's presence was intimidating. Wang third didn't dare fight back, and with all 4s on the ground, he scurried out of the alley. Liang Qu threw one of the broken bricks at him, hitting Wang third in the lower back. Wang Third's shoulder sagged, and he nearly face-planted. Clutching his injured back, he crawled out of the alley. Liang Qu had no time to chase him, so he turned back to deal with the two on the ground, kicking and punching them. Animals like you don't even deserve to live. Wang Eldest tried to resist, but Liang Qu easily shoved him down again. He had no idea where Liang Qu's strength came from as his head cracked against the wall, nearly making him cough blood. Liang Qu kicked Wang Second back as he tried to crawl away, grabbed Wang Eldest by the hair with one hand, and slapped him with the other. The two of them could only howl in pain, blood running down their faces. They'd even wet themselves, making Liang Qu feel disgusted. Get out! Get lost! The Wang brothers groaned, feeling as if they'd been pardoned, and crawled out of the alley, propping each other up as they left in humiliation. Liang Qu's expression was cold. If it weren't for the trouble of handling bodies, he would have dealt with them for good. Just a bunch of lowlifes, wasting food by being alive. By now, a crowd had gathered outside the alley, drawn by the sound of the fight. The Wang brothers had a reputation for trouble, and people weren't scared, they were cheering. "Ah Shui, you're only 16, right? How'd you get this strong?" "No, he's 15, won't turn 16 until after New Year's." "Impressive." "Yeah, look, those two wet their pants." "Ha ha ha." Catching his breath, Liang Qu said with a steady tone, "Well, just so everyone knows, I'm strong because I've been training in martial arts. Master Hu at the martial arts school said I've got extraordinary potential and that I'm a once-in-a-century martial arts prodigy. So, dealing with a few thugs is nothing." At this, the crowd's expressions turned thoughtful. Martial Arts. Chapter 19. Autumn Tax Part 1. Learning Martial Arts. A martial arts prodigy. The crowd mulled over these words, feeling somewhat unsettled. It seemed almost unfathomable that such a person would appear in Yixing City, let alone be associated with Liang Qu. Who was he, after all? An orphan. A title that has always been unbearably heavy, no matter the era. Most orphans either end up begging or selling themselves to survive, and many quietly starve to death come winter. Liang Qu and his father had always struggled. Many neighbors still remembered Liang Dajiang, a widower who had passed away. Although they didn't just wrap his body in straw, they could only afford a thin coffin, hastily buried on a hill behind the village, with a simple wooden plaque marking the grave. Liang Dajiang's fishing skills had been mediocre at best. Other than a decent boat, there wasn't even a fishing net left behind. As his son, Liang Qu wasn't much better off. The only thing noteworthy about him might be his appearance. But in these times, no matter how handsome a young boy is, no one would consider him marriage material, nor would that help him put food on the table. Still, as they watched the three brothers flee, that seemed to be the only possible explanation. Everyone exchanged glances. Most had thought Liang Qu's path would be like that of other orphans, selling himself or begging. But now, it seemed he was forging an entirely different path, as if transformed. First, he had done well at fishing, earning almost 100 wen each day from his catches. Later, he even managed to catch a rare treasure fish, and not just any treasure fish, a truly valuable one that sold for twice the price of others. It was apparent that the money he made from selling fish had been spent on martial arts training. Reading and martial arts have long been two of the best ways for ordinary people to elevate themselves. Setting aside the path of education, martial arts training wasn't entirely foreign to them. Though they may not have seen it firsthand, they'd heard of it. But they'd never known anyone from the countryside to truly make a name through martial arts. Even if someone trained and came back, they wouldn't be able to hold down a river crossing for their family or bring in more acres of land or catch more fish. It seemed like wasted money. But Liang Qu was proving to be the exception. Whatever the case, reaching this point showed he was not like ordinary folk, and some began to flatter him. Ah Shui has a bright future ahead, he might even be a master someday. If you become a martial artist, don't forget us neighbors. Yes, yes, when you become a master, I'll have my son learn from you. Liang Qu wasn't too excited by their reactions, he merely claimed he was fortunate. The reason he mentioned his martial arts training was to stop the freeloaders from showing up every other day. He wanted to get 2 points across. First, he had no money left, it was all spent on martial arts training and tuition. Second, he had a talent for martial arts, so anyone thinking of taking advantage should think twice. There was also a third reason: his appearance and mannerisms would start to change more noticeably. This way, he could simply say it was due to his training. And if anyone wondered why others didn't have the same changes, well, did others have his extraordinary talent? He was planting a seed of exceptional talent so that, later on, even more extreme transformations would seem less surprising. Once the crowd dispersed, Liang Qu went back home. He moved the rice jar aside and dug out the silver buried in the dirt, letting out a sigh of relief to see that none of it was missing. The autumn tax was approaching soon, and without the money, he'd be in serious trouble. Fortunately, thanks to the whip law, and the policy of single whips, all men, fishermen's taxes were straightforward, a single silver tael for an adult male. However, due to inconsistencies in silver quality and the standard being official silver, there was an extra melting fee. Naturally, this was a cost borne by the people, making the actual tax closer to 1 tael and 3 qian. According to the Dishan dynasty's 16-year age threshold, Liang Qu was still a few months short. But everyone knew the deal. A few months or even half a year short, you'd still be counted as 16. In theory, the whip law meant he should only need to pay silver. Yet in the Zhonghuai wetlands and surrounding areas, several counties still demanded rice, which would be sent to the capital. Tomorrow, he would have to buy rice, or prices would spike further. With that in mind, Liang Qu put away his money. Then he picked up a tree branch, drew a chart on the ground, and began to practice his forms. He used the chart to track his progress and determine the optimal times and methods for training. This was his scientific approach to body conditioning. The next morning, Liang Qu took his silver and arrived early at the rice shop, which was already bustling with people. He walked straight in and was greeted by a long counter with rows of rice bins beside it, each filled with grain for display. If you were buying small amounts, you could take it directly. For larger purchases, they'd fetch it from the storeroom. Behind the counter sat the shopkeeper, tallying figures on an abacus and making notes with a brush. When Liang entered, the shopkeeper glanced up briefly before returning to his work, showing little interest in serving him, likely because Liang's clothes looked rather shabby and poor. "Here, take your rice. That'll be 36 yuan. Pay at the counter," said the clerk cheerfully to another customer. "Sir, what kind of rice would you like?" the shop assistant called out warmly to Liang after wrapping up with the other customer. Looking around, Liang noticed they had fine rice, coarse rice, low-grade rice, sticky rice, and sweet potatoes, among other options, but none had listed prices. "How much is the fine rice per jin?" 10 yuan per jin. "That expensive? Wasn't it just 9 yuan per jin a few days ago?" The clerk smiled. "Well, it's autumn tax season. More people are buying rice to avoid labor taxes, so prices rise daily. If you wait another couple of days, it might be 11 or 12. The rapid price fluctuation explained the lack of price tags, Liang mused. "Could you go any lower?" This. Thud. The shopkeeper set down his brush and spoke without looking up. "Everywhere charges this price now. Buy if you want, if not, make way for the others waiting." Liang's eyebrow twitched, and he was tempted to smack the shopkeeper, but Yixing City had only this one rice shop. Offending them meant he'd have to go all the way to Pingyang town. One shi of rice was over 150 jin. Carrying it 10-something li would be exhausting, and taking a cart would cost extra, so it wasn't worth it. And one shi of rice might not even be enough. With ghost feet measuring, a shi might be counted as only 7 do, so he'd likely need to buy a shi and a half to be safe. When you had money and grain, you could afford to be arrogant. Not wanting to fuss over silver, Liang continued, 1 jin of rice is 10 yuan, so what if I buy a shi and a half and pay in silver? A shi and a half with silver. The shopkeeper thought it over, worked his abacus, and said, "I'll give it to you for 1 tael, 6 qian. Deal." Liang quickly calculated. He wasn't great at haggling, either he took the offer, or he didn't. 1 shi and a half for 1 tael, 6 qian. Fair enough. All right, 1 tael, 6 jian. Liang handed over the money, dodging the clerk's eager hand. You'll deliver the rice to my home, right? Where's your home? In Yixing City. Of course, that's included. Good, let's move the rice, then. Liang handed over the silver without worry. If there was one thing he appreciated about ancient times, it was that shops didn't scam locals with underhanded tactics. If there was exploitation, it was up front, like with the fishing gear rentals. Here, they charged what they charged openly, rather than using tricks. In a place with low population mobility, such a shop wouldn't survive otherwise. After the rice was delivered and stored safely at home, Liang went on a small shopping spree. He bought 2 baskets to hold the rice, a new quilt, 2 sets of clothes, 2 pairs of cloth shoes, a good fishing net, some soap, a pig bristle toothbrush, and a bit of tooth powder, spending every last bit of his money. Carrying his soft new quilt and other supplies, Liang couldn't help but reflect on how fast money disappeared. He'd only bought basic necessities, yet he was already down to his last few taels. But at least with a warm quilt, he was certain to have a good night's sleep tonight. Chapter 20, Autumn Tax Part 2. Returning home, Liang Qu cleaned out the rice jar, boiled some water, poured it in, stirred it around, and, once he confirmed the water was just right, jumped in, scrubbing down with soap for a thorough bath. Sure, he went into the water often, but it just wasn't the same without soap. At 15 or 16, with an active metabolism, his scalp was always oily, and all the training made him sweat, leaving him feeling far from fresh. During this, Liang Qu discovered a new trick. After soaping up, he could control a portion of the water to rinse off the soap and let it flow away, saving him from changing the water. At night, he lay down on his newly bought bedding and had a comfortable, restful sleep. For the next few days, he was out on the boat, practicing his martial skills while Ah Fei fished. In the evenings, they'd head back pretending they'd spent the day fishing. Meanwhile, he added more expensive fish to their catches, managing to save another 6 jian of silver. Maybe it was because of the good sleep, but his practice went smoother, with a noticeable improvement in his efficiency. This ghostly weather's getting colder. This morning, Liang Qu hugged his blanket, reluctant to leave the warm bed, just wanting to doze off a bit longer. Reality and novels really are different. You always see protagonists training endlessly without fatigue, as if it's no big deal. But in reality, unless you're a machine, it's impossible to keep going without breaks. Even 3 consecutive hours of training is impressive. Any more, and anyone would burn out. Time to pay the autumn tax. Everyone, head to the pier to hand in your grain. Just as he was thinking about a little more sleep, Liang Qu heard someone shouting outside and snapped awake. The autumn tax day wasn't set in stone. It was usually around a certain time, but the exact day depended on the officials. He quickly threw on some clothes and headed outside, seeing everyone starting to carry their grain down to the pier. It, why not just take silver instead? Why do we still have to pay with fine rice? I have to carry over 200 jin myself. He could only grumble to himself. No matter what, he still had to do the work. With over 100 jin of rice, he couldn't carry it all in one trip. Fortunately, at the pier, he saw Li Libo and his family and asked them to keep an eye on his load while he made a second trip. How's it going with your training at the martial arts school? Li Libo sighed. Just finished Monkey Fist and started on Tiger Fist. Only now have I caught up with you. Liang Qu patted him on the shoulder, not sure how to comfort him. Oh, by the way, why haven't you been around lately? Busy with the autumn tax. I don't have anyone to help with it. Oh, Shui, my kid's not too bright, you have to help him out more, said an elderly man nearby. It was Li Libo's father, Li Dekong. He'd heard from Libo that Liang Qu had a strong foundation, and even heard about how he'd put the Wang brothers in their place a few days ago. Of course. The scene before him somehow reminded Liang Qu of his own school days in his previous life. The universal parental concern is really touching. Next, Chen Jicheng. At the front of the pier, the village head held a household registry and called out names one by one. Nearby, the household leaders and village scribe sat at a table, brush in hand, recording the taxes. Next to them, an official was kicking the measuring bucket used to weigh the grain. Each kick caused the overflowing grain to spill, and watching it fall made people's hearts skip a beat. One naive man bent down to pick up the scattered grain, only to be scolded harshly by an official, "Don't pick it up. That's loss allowance. Hey, I'm talking to you, stop picking it up." The official aimed a kick at the man on the ground, sending him sprawling. This was the notorious tip spill kick. Grain piles had to be heaped to a pointed tip that would rise above the bucket's edge. When an official kicked the bucket, a lot of grain would spill over, and it was up to the villagers to make up for the loss. In short, it was a practice with vague loss allowances. Officials transferred transportation risks onto the villagers, and if the loss was small, they pocketed it. So, the more they kicked, the better. "This year's not going to be easy. Good thing we brought extra," said Li Libo with a nervous sigh. "If only I could become a martial artist. Not only would I have a tax exemption quota, but I'd also earn a salary. It's almost as prestigious as being a scholar. So impressive. Pingyang town collected their tax yesterday. Ah Shui, you should have seen it. When a few barrier-breaking fighters arrived, the officials didn't dare to kick the bucket, they were all smiles." Li Libo chuckled quietly, but before he could finish, his father kicked him hard. "What's wrong with you? Just shut that mouth of yours." Libo pouted and kept quiet. The line inched forward slowly, with people occasionally breaking down in tears when they couldn't pay the tax. Those people ended up beaten and dragged away, likely to be sent into forced labor. Watching these harsh scenes, Liang Qu felt helpless. All he had to his name were 6 jian of silver and a stone and a half of rice. All he could do was wait his turn in silence. When his name was called, he handed over his rice, watching as the official's kick scattered a significant amount. He went back to bring more rice to make up for the loss. Liang Qu wasn't foolish enough to bring the full 200 jin in one trip. He knew to bring extra and then add more when necessary. If he had been overly prepared, the officials wouldn't have commended his efficiency, they would have just taken advantage. Once the tax was paid, he saw the village head make a mark next to his name in the ledger and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness the officials hadn't decided to tax him for his late father. After all, he'd only passed away a couple of months ago. If it were postponed, they could absolutely pull that stunt in the future. Gathering his things, Liang Qu began walking back against the crowd. He was only halfway home when he heard pleading behind him, followed by the sharp crack of a whip. "Dmn it, you got snot on my leg." At first, Liang Qu thought it was another poor soul unable to pay their taxes. But turning back, he was shocked to see that the one whipped was Chen Qingzhong's father, Chen Renxing. What's going on? Hadn't he seen Uncle Chen bring the grain earlier? That should have been enough. Realizing something was wrong, Liang Qu grabbed Li Libo. "Brother Li, hurry to my place and get the 3 dough of rice I've got left." Libo was startled but understood this wasn't the time to ask questions and quickly slipped away through the crowd. Chen Qingzhong, meanwhile, was shielding his father, pleading with the official for leniency. "It's not that I don't want to pay the tax, but we simply don't have the means. My son fell ill recently, and all our savings went to his treatment. Besides, he's only 6, not yet 7. It turned out that while Chen Qingzhong had brought the required amount, his family of 5, 2 men, 1 woman, and 2 young boys, was supposed to pay 2 stone and 6 dough of rice. However, the officials' kicks had spilled over 7 doughs worth of grain. Worse still, they had counted Chen Qingzhong's 6-year-old son as 7, making him liable for the tax. A 7-year-old boy was subject to tax, although at a reduced rate compared to adults, requiring only 3 dough. But now, they were short nearly a whole stone of rice. Chen Qingzhong had anticipated some shortfall, preparing an extra 3 dough, but he couldn't make up the additional 7 dough no matter what. The official scoffed, "Are you accusing me of unfairness?" "Not at all. I'm only begging for some extra time, and I swear we'll make up the difference." Chen Qingzhong knelt, pleading, as his 6-year-old son Chen Shun sobbed. The crowd stayed silent, not daring to intervene, and no one was willing to step forward to help. 7 dough of rice, equivalent to over 700 yuan in copper coins. Who would be so generous? The child's crying irritated the official, who lifted his whip again. Liang Qu stepped forward, pulling little Shun behind him, rubbing his hands together and bowing apologetically. Please, sir, forgive them. Uncle Chen must have forgotten he still had some rice at home. We'll bring it right over. Just then, Li Libo rushed back, shouting for people to make way as he carried a sack of rice and poured it into the bucket. It was exactly 3 dough. The official sneered, only 3 dough. Still short by 4. Liang Qu took out his hard-earned 6 jian of silver and handed it over with a bow. There's just no way to make up the difference, I've been too busy to buy more rice. Please accept these 6 jian as a small tribute. The shortage was only an excuse, and 6 jian of silver could easily buy 6 or 7 dough of rice, totaling 9 dough, which was even more than needed. The official weighed the silver in his hand and, without a word, pocketed it. All right, but don't let it happen again. Of course. Thank you, sir. Breathing a sigh of relief, Liang Qu helped Chen Qingjiang support his father and took little Shun's hand, quickly leaving under the official's gaze. Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audio Wave to stay updated with our latest stories. And never miss out on a great listen.